Imagine 1930s Britain. Unemployment is rising, the Great Depression has shaken faith in democracy, and on the streets of London, men in black uniforms march beneath the lightning bolt symbol of a new movement. They call themselves the British Union of Fascists, led by Sir Oswald Mosley. Inspired by Mussolini's Italy, Mosley promised to make Britain strong again. This is a story of how fascism came to Britain, how it almost took root, and why it ultimately failed. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, my name is Stefan, I'm a Dutch history teacher and I make videos about history for you. And if you like that, please consider subscribing and don't forget to hit the notification bell. By the way, if you speak Dutch or you like to listen to AI generated synchronization, do check out the podcast channel of me and my younger brother. Click right here or see the link in the pinned comment. In the 1930s, also the British economy suffered under the Great Depression. British mainstream political parties negotiated their own version of the crisis agreements to combat the economic repression. Britain saw the rise of fascist parties. The first political organization in the United Kingdom to claim the label of fascism were the British Fascists, formed in 1923. This group was strongly associated with British conservatism, but apart from anti-socialism didn't have much unity. The group was founded by a woman, Rotha Linton-Orman. A splinter group from this movement were the National Fascisti (NF), later renamed British National Fascists (BNF). The BNF was dissolved in the late 1920s. Former member Arnold Lees would found the Imperial Fascist League in 1929. When the Second World War began, this small organization quickly disintegrated. The biggest fascist party in Britain would be the BUF, the British Union of Fascists, led by Sir Oswald Mosley. Who was Oswald Mosley? Oswald Mosley was born on the 16th of November 1896 in London, the eldest of three sons of Sir Oswald Mosley, 5th Baronet. Through his father, Mosley was distantly related to British nobility. The Mosley family traced its lineage back to the 12th century. Mosley's parents had a troubled marriage. His father, a gambler and heavy drinker, was often absent. Mosley was raised mainly by his mother and grandfather. He admired his mother deeply, but modeled his sense of masculinity on his grandfather. Mosley was an intelligent but restless student. He excelled in boxing and fencing, becoming a public school champion in both foil and saber, and retained a lifelong passion for the sport. He entered the Royal Military College at Sandhurst in January 1914. He later described his time there as one of the happiest periods of his life, though it was ended abruptly when he was expelled in June after a righteous act of retaliation against another cadet. When the First World War broke out, Mosley was commissioned into the 16th Queen's Lancers and served on the Western Front in France. Later, he joined the Royal Flying Corps as a pilot and observer, but during a demonstration flight in front of his family, he crashed, leaving him with a permanent limp and reputation for reckless courage. On the 11th of May 1920, Mosley married Lady Cynthia Curzon, daughter of George Curzon, 1st Marquess Curzon of Candleston, a former Viceroy of India and Foreign Secretary. The marriage initially boosted Mosley's social and political standing, though it was shadowed by gossip as Mosley's private life soon turned scandalous. He carried on long-term affairs with both Cynthia's sister, Lady Alexandra Metcalfe, and their stepmother, Grace Curzon. In 1928, after his father's death, Mosley inherited the Mosley baronetcy of Ancoats. The way Britain managed its crisis in the interwar years gave people confidence that problems could still be solved within the existing political system. Because of this, fascism in Britain never seemed truly necessary. Oswald Mosley, founder of the British Union of Fascists, BUF, had started his political journey inside the very institutions he later came to reject. He was first elected as a Conservative MP in 1918, later joined the Labour Party in 1924 and left it in 1930 after growing frustrated with the lack of ambition. He went on to form the New Party in 1931 and the BUF the following year. This shifting political path led many to accuse Mosley of opportunism, that he, like Mussolini, sought power simply for his own sake. Yet, his evolution followed a certain logic. Mosley viewed the crisis of the First World War and the Great Depression as part of a single collapse of Western civilization. To him, fascism offered the only real solution. Influenced by the disillusioned trench generation, he believed the war had destroyed faith in progress, religion, and democracy. The Britain that emerged from the war, far from being a land fit for heroes, was plagued by high unemployment and stagnant politics, which Mosley saw as proof of the failure of liberal democracy and laissez-faire economics. During the 1920s, Mosley developed his own economic ideas, drawing on lessons from wartime state planning, early Keynesian theory, and imperial economics. He argued that the state should take an active role in stimulating demand, creating jobs, and rebuilding Britain's economy through public investment and protectionist trade within the empire. These proposals were rejected by his colleagues in the Labour government, which led Mosley to break away and try to implement his ideas through his own movements. In his 1932 book, The Greater Britain, Mosley outlined what he saw as a rational plan to end unemployment and revive national prosperity. His approach was similar in spirit of other interwar thinkers, such as Keynes, William Beveridge, and the neo-socialists in Europe, who called for a planned economy that balanced capitalism with social welfare. Many of these ideas would later become central to the post-1945 welfare state. What made Mosley's vision distinctively fascist, however, was not the economics themselves, but the authoritarian political system he believed was required to enforce them. Convinced that Britain's democratic leaders lacked the courage to act, he came to see the one-party dictatorship as the only means to achieve national revival.
We live in a period in which politicians are not very popular, and believe me, you have my sympathy. Politicians are regarded as people who have learnt to talk but not to act, and you demand action, and rightly demand it, in dealing with unemployment.
Mosley envisioned replacing Britain's elected parliament with a corporate assembly, where decisions about the economy would be made not by politicians, but by a technocratic elite representing producers and industry. Whether power was gained through elections or by force, he believed a fascist government should first rule by emergency decree, suspending parliament temporarily and then abolishing it altogether. For Mosley, Britain's decline was ultimately a moral failure of leadership. The so-called old gang of traditional politicians had, in his eyes, failed to preserve Britain's role as a global power. Only the new man of fascism, energetic, visionary, and ruthless, could restore civilization's vitality. In reality, however, the political crisis Mosley hoped would bring fascism to power never materialized. When Britain faced severe economic instability in 1931, the political system managed to stabilize itself. The national government, a coalition of conservatives, liberals, and a few Labour members under Ramsay MacDonald, restored confidence and steered the country through the Depression. By 1932, the Conservatives dominated Parliament. Yet, the coalition's national label reassured voters that this was a united response to the crisis, proof that the parliamentary system could still work. Ironically, the government even implemented some moderate protectionist reflationary policies echoing parts of Mosley's own economic plan. These moves showed that Britain's establishment could adapt in hard times. undermining Mosley's argument that only fascism could save the nation. The BUF's peak came in 1933-34, when it gained around 50,000 members and backing of Lord Rothermere's Daily Mail, which admired Mussolini's supposed success in Italy. The BUF followed the Italian example and ran holiday camps, which were heavily advertised in the party's publications and which strongly imitated the Italian fascist ones. At the BUF's seaside camps, a full range of fascist symbols were displayed together with the British Union Jack. Members wore uniforms and Oswald Mosley inspected the camps. Excursions also served to foster transnational contacts, as fascist movements in Europe organized them in order to enable members to meet adherents of foreign fascist groups. But this support for the BUF vanished after the violent rally at Olympia in June 1934, where clashes with protesters revealed the movement's thuggish character. Unlike Mussolini's Blackshirts, Mosley's men failed to create the illusion of restoring order. Instead, they became seen as the source of disorder, although Mosley himself reflected otherwise on this in an interview in 1967.
When you show pictures of me in uniform, it was because men like you came by the score to our meetings, enormous meetings like that in Exhibition Hall, London, 30,000 people coming to listen to us, which was in perfect order because we'd stopped people like you breaking up the meetings. And I did that with the Black Shirt movement, and I'm proud to have organized and led the Black Shirt movement to restore free speech to Britain.
No. But you started a fashion that you learned from your friend Adolf Hitler. You thought that anti-Semitism...
Now you want to make
just a minute, let him answer.
You want to bring the meeting, as your friends often tried before, to a close and stop the speaker, either of the speakers, having their say. And that is why we organized to put people like you out when you denied free speech in Britain. And it was a right and proper thing to do, and they were magnificent young men, and I'm proud to have led and organized them to put people like you out of meetings.
Frequent brawls between fascists and anti-fascists led to the Public Order Act of 1937, which banned political uniforms and allowed police to restrict marches. Constant opposition from both the state and grassroots anti-fascist groups kept the BUF marginal. Membership fluctuated through the 1930s, but by then it had become a minor extremist group, attracting social outsiders rather than serious political figures. Between 1935 and 1938, Mosley tried to revive his movement through local campaigns, particularly among unemployed workers in South Wales, Lancashire and East London. Only in London's East End did the BUF gain traction, exploiting anti-Jewish resentment in poor white neighborhoods. By this time, roughly half of the BUF's 50,000 remaining members were concentrated there. The BUF's anti-Semitism, which became overt after 1934, remains a subject of historical debate. Mosley depicted Jews not through racial theory, but as a cultural nation within a nation that profited at others' expense. He later claimed anti-Semitism was merely a reaction to opposition from Jewish and communist groups, a self-serving explanation that ignored how his own propaganda provoked that resistance. He said the following in a 1975 interview.
I was never anti-Semitic, and I'll define anti-Semitic. By that I mean someone who attacks Jews on account of race or on account of religion. I had a quarrel, not with all Jews, but with some Jews about one subject, whether there should be a Second World War or not. Now, coming back from the First World War, after that time in the air and in the trenches and in the loss of all my friends, I was very strongly against another war. And it seemed to me, rightly or wrongly, that's a question we could debate, that certain Jews were trying to provoke a Second World War because their compatriots or co-religionists were admittedly having a very bad time in Germany.
In practice, anti-Semitism isolated and weakened the BUF. It alienated the wider public and tied the government's image to Nazi Germany. Rather than becoming a national force, the BUF was reduced to a local, discredited sect, trapped by the hatred it had itself unleashed. From 1934 onward, British intelligence agencies MI5 closely monitored Oswald Mosley and the BUF. They had infiltrated the movement and even bugged Mosley's communications, fearing his powerful speeches might win public sympathy and funding. Although admired by some for his charisma, the government's patience ran out when World War II began. In May 1940, as Mosley urged Britain to accept Hitler's peace offer, he was arrested and interned under Defense Regulation 18B without trial. His wife Diana was also imprisoned, and the BUF was officially banned. During his confinement, Mosley read extensively on politics and history, and his detention sparked public debate, though most Britons supported it. He was released in 1943 due to illness and lived under house arrest until the war's end. After the war, Mosley tried to revive his political career by founding the Union movement in 1948, promoting the idea of a united Europe. His post-war rallies faced constant opposition, leading him to leave Britain for Ireland and later France. In his later years, Mosley became notorious for denial of the death camps of World War II and anti-immigration campaigns. Despite brief political comebacks in the 1950s and 60s, he remained a deeply discredited figure until his death. He passed away in 1980. Click here to learn about the British that fought or wanted to fight for Nazi Germany. Thanks as always for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.